My life felt like a dream come true, one of those you're afraid to wake up from. I was about to marry Julian, the man I had pictured for years as the father of my children, my life partner, my safest haven. Everything was prepared with care. The flowers, the menu, the music, even the small details only we understood. My mother cried tears of joy as I looked at myself in the mirror, dressed in my white gown, thinking that I had finally found true happiness. What I didn't know was that this wedding, which was supposed to seal a love story, would actually mark the beginning of my greatest tragedy. From the start, I knew I couldn't walk down the aisle without my best friend, Laura Jenkins, by my side. She was more than just a friend. She was my soul sister, my confidant, the only person who knew every corner of my heart. That's why I chose her as my maid of honor, without a second thought. No one questioned my decision. Everyone knew how deep our connection was. She smiled with a genuine-looking tenderness as she helped me with my veil and made sure everything was perfect. What I didn't know was that behind her sweet eyes, a dark secret was hiding, a secret that would destroy my life from the inside out. We wanted an intimate wedding, far from the hustle and bustle of the city. That's why we chose an elegant estate in the hills of Virginia, surrounded by century-old trees and blooming gardens. The place was magical, with a stately stone manor, cozy rooms, and a hall with high ceilings and enormous windows that let in the warm light of the setting sun. There, surrounded by our families and closest friends, we dreamed of celebrating our love and starting a new life together. Nothing seemed out of place. Everything felt harmonious. But that same place would soon witness the most painful collapse of my existence. We had rented the entire estate for the weekend so that our parents and the wedding party could stay the night before and after the wedding. We wanted it to be more than just an event. We wanted it to be a moment of togetherness, shared laughter, and joyful anticipation. The night before, we all had dinner together on the patio, which was lit by string lights, with soft music playing and glasses of wine in our hands. Julian seemed calm, even affectionate, and Laura never left my side, just as always. No one suspected that behind all that calm, a storm was brewing that would change our lives forever. That night, I went to bed with a heart full of hope, mentally replaying every moment of the day, convinced that I had finally found happiness. I fell asleep late, feeling nervous but happy, picturing the moment I would walk toward Julian in my white dress. The next morning, the first rays of sun came through the window, and I woke up with an energy I hadn't felt since I was a little girl. Laura was the first one to enter my room, bringing me breakfast with a smile that I now remember as a mask. I felt grateful, excited, and secure. I couldn't have known that nothing was real anymore. When it was time, my father took my arm, and we walked toward the garden where everyone was waiting for us. The soft sound of string instruments, the white petals on the ground, the tearful eyes of our loved ones. Everything looked like it was from a storybook. Julian was waiting for me at the end of the aisle with glistening eyes and the smile that had made me fall in love with him so many times. I walked toward him, holding back tears, convinced that I was taking the most important and beautiful step of my life. No one could have seen that my "I do" would actually be the beginning of my greatest heartbreak. When the officiant asked if we accepted to join our lives, I didn't hesitate for a second. My voice was shaky but firm as I said, "I do," my eyes full of love as I looked at Julian. He also said, "I do," with a smile, though for a moment I thought his expression dimmed right after he said it. I just figured it was nerves, that we all feel that little bit of anxiety when we take such a big step. We kissed to the sound of applause, surrounded by white flowers and tears of emotion. In that instant, I believed it was all worth it, that our love was real. The celebration was exactly as we had imagined, intimate, elegant, and full of joy. We ate under a starry sky with soft music playing in the background and candles lit at every table. There were moments of laughter, anecdotes, and hugs that seemed sincere, as if we were all a part of something eternal. Julian talked to our guests and laughed, but there was something distant in the way he looked at me. I didn't want to think too much of it. I thought he was just tired from all the planning and decided to enjoy every second. My father stood up, emotional, to toast our union, speaking of how proud he was of me and how he had watched our love grow. Everyone applauded, and Julian raised his glass with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, as if he were forcing the emotion. I looked at him, trying to find that usual spark, but all I found was a strange silence in his gaze. I thought that maybe I was just being too sensitive, that I shouldn't look for problems where there weren't any. But deep down, something inside of me was starting to crack, even though I didn't know it yet. After the party, we went up to the bridal suite together, a warm and elegant space we had decorated with flowers and candles to make it unforgettable. My heart was pounding, a mix of excitement and nerves, as I thought about how special this night, our first as husband and wife, would be. I closed the door softly, wanting to prolong the intimate moment, believing we were about to seal our story with love. Julian placed his watch on the nightstand, took off his shoes without looking at me, and sighed heavily. I went to hug him, and that's when I heard it. "I'm tired," he said, not looking at me, his tone dry and flat, as if I wasn't even there. I stood frozen, trying to figure out if it was a joke, if something had happened that I didn't see, but his face was serious, distant, and completely devoid of emotion or desire. He turned his back to me, unbuttoned his shirt, and went straight to the twin bed that was in a corner of the room. He didn't say goodnight or turn around. He just turned off the light, leaving the room in a silence that hurt more than any yell. I sat on the edge of the marriage bed, not knowing what to do with my body or my thoughts, feeling invisible on the most important night of my life. I waited for what felt like endless minutes for a gesture, a word, an explanation, but all I got was the sound of his quiet breathing from the other side of the room. I slowly lay down on the bed, unable to hold back the tears, trying to not make a sound so I wouldn't seem pathetic. The room smelled of fresh flowers, but inside my chest, everything was withering. And that's how I spent my first night as a wife, alone, confused, and with a broken soul. I don't know how long I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, wishing it was all a nightmare, that Julian would come over and hug me by surprise. But the hours passed, the silence was absolute, and his body remained still in the twin bed, as far from me as if we were two strangers. At some point, exhaustion won out, and I closed my eyes. But I couldn't have been asleep for more than 30 minutes, when a muffled sound woke me up with a jolt. I sat up, my heart racing, confused, trying to figure out where it was coming from. I turned my head, and Julian's bed was empty. I slowly got up, my bare feet on the cold floor, feeling a knot in my stomach that I couldn't explain. I walked to the door, opened it carefully, and heard the sound again. It was a short, stifled groan, as if someone was trying not to make noise. The hallway was dark, only lit by the faint light coming from a room at the end. I stood there for a few seconds, trying to convince myself that maybe it was a movie, a voice on the TV, anything logical, but something inside me already knew that I was about to hear what I should never have heard. I forced myself to move, still without making a sound. And that's when I remembered that the room belonged to my mother-in-law, Julian's mother. She had said at the end of the dinner that she was feeling sick and had to go into town to get some medicine. She hadn't been back since, and no one seemed to have worried about her absence. My mind began to piece together the impossible, but my heart refused to believe it. What was Julian doing in there in the middle of the night, in his mother's room, which was supposed to be empty? I took one more